Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on behalf of a special partnership with Alaska Public Media on this Thursday, April 7th, 2022. And if you ever have any photos to share or interesting information you wish to pass along, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. And for additional weather information on what you receive within this broadcast, you can go to weather.gov online and find a point-and-click map, a map of the United States, as well as Hawaii and Alaska there to the lower left. And it's a point-and-click map that allows you to access a variety of forecasts, watches, warnings, and much more information. Looking at the map, at least as of this Thursday afternoon, we have high wind warnings covering much of the Dakotas, Nebraska, western Kansas, eastern Colorado, and the Texas-Oklahoma Panhandle, along with the areas in pink indicate red flag warnings for windy and very dry conditions causing very high fire danger and some severe weather. The yellow area there out, severe weather watch in effect for portions of southeast Virginia and eastern North Carolina. Well, what do we have coming up here for the state of Alaska? There is a cold front on the west side of the state. It's moved inland and it's going to slowly press eastward through the night and during the day tomorrow across the central and east central interior. That's going to bring about a change. Areas of the Panhandle will continue to see scattered mixed showers, kind of squally weather that will continue into the day on Friday. Still a possibility of a minor geomagnetic storm that could enhance auroras tonight. We're still waiting that particular disturbance to arrive, and that may yet happen. So if skies are clear in your location, it would be worth a look, though we are now getting past first quarter moon. And then I'll have a little update as it concerns the 2022 river breakup outlook, a little additional information here within the past day or so. Quick check of what current advisories are in effect. We have a winter weather advisory that is in effect until midnight this Thursday night. It continues there for the upper Noatak Valley, including places like Ambler and Walker Lake. There's been a few inches of snow up that way past 24 hours or so. That's along and just behind that cold front. The cold front, though, will continue to press eastward through Bettles, Tanana, and then on over toward Fairbanks. That's going to put an end to the mild weather that's crept north of the Alaska Range, especially up through the eastern part of the state. Taking a look at some sky cams from the FAA, Ambler up that way, getting some light snow and fog today. The temperature only 2 above, so it is chilly. Earlier this morning, Shishimaraef was down to 21 below zero for the state's coldest temperature this Thursday morning. Further south along the Alaska Range, Roan there, partly cloudy, 37, a very beautiful view of the mountains. And then Carl Rainey, he submitted this. I appreciate this little video from out of Valdez. A foot of snow falling there, and that's not even enough to trigger advisory criteria because you get such heavy precipitation in that part of the northern Gulf Coast, but nevertheless a delay to spring. Further south, Cold Bay has seen scattered snow showers. Temperature there on the cool side, 23 degrees. And then as we go across the Gulf over to Sitka in the central outer panhandle, they're seeing some scattered rain showers that could be mixed at times with some ice pellets or snow pellets. Temperature there 44, and tomorrow that kind of showery, squally pattern will continue. Could even be a rumble of thunder as some colder air aloft will add to the instability. And then to update the latest information we have for the 2022 river breakup, we are anticipating the spring breakup flood potential to be above average, especially along and south of the Brooks Range, except for near average along the north slope on the north slide. Snowpack across the state is near to above normal. It is much above normal across the Yukon Territory in Canada, which feeds the upper portion of the Yukon Basin, so that's noteworthy. We're seeing observed near to above normal ice conditions on the rivers. And right now, our River Forecast Center people that forecast this river breakup, it says the outlook favors a dynamic breakup with a cool first half of April giving way to warmer than normal temperatures. So we'll see how this progresses here in the next week or two. We'll have our first update, River Watch update coming up a week from today, Thursday. One of our River Forecast Center forecasters will be providing the update with one of their special videos. Looking at the satellite imagery, you can see that low pressure in the northern Gulf kind of peeling back toward Prince William Sound. It'll gradually weaken. But nevertheless, it's keeping things unstable there, helped to provide that snow at Valdez. And then we have a band of clouds there through the western interior along just backside of that cold front. That cold front this afternoon is right there in through the central interior and slowly will work its way eastward as we head through tonight and on Thursday. A couple of lows from the lower southeast Gulf south of AKwx and then back up there just to the southwest of Yakutat. It'll continue to back up westward toward Prince William Sound, east side of the Kenai, late tonight into early on Thursday morning. Rather brisk conditions though on the west side of this cold front as it works its way through the central and east central interior. It's going to bring gusty winds and some intervals of snow, especially most noteworthy in some of the passes of the Alaska Range and along the Alaska Highway. And then by Saturday, we see a warm front out there lifting out of the central Bering up to along the west coast through St. Lawrence Island into the lower Yukon Delta and approaching the Seward Peninsula. That's going to push or lift out some of the colder air that's currently along the west coast and kind of push it back there through the eastern part of the state. Looking at low temperatures tonight, we do anticipate lows generally above freezing there in the Panhandle. Below freezing, though, we get out through much of at least the coastal and interior south central areas, and then quite a bit chillier, single digits near and below zero along and west of the Alaska Range. For Friday afternoon, ahead of the cold front, still warmer air still along the Kenai Peninsula with temperatures above freezing up through Anchorage, Talkeetna, eastward even to Glen Allen. Lower 40s, say, there along the northern Gulf Coast and especially into the Panhandle. Colder temperatures, though, settle in for Saturday morning across the interior south central areas, though still around freezing for the Panhandle. Warmest temperatures Saturday will be through the Panhandle with readings in the 40s, but we expect temperatures to cool a little bit back down to around or a little above freezing across south central areas. Now, look, cold air is in place over the northwest and west side of the state. Friday morning lows below zero. Notice as we go through the day, temperatures are going to have cooled. We've seen readings 40 plus around Fairbanks, falling back into the lower 20s. Still could be up around freezing there for Yukon and along the Alcan border, but then come Saturday morning, we see temperatures slipping below zero, even up through the central Yukon Valley, single digits elsewhere, below zero, North Slope and Arctic Coast. And temperatures cooler, upper teens and lower to mid 20s across the middle and east central portions of the state as we run up along the Yukon River. And across the southwest interior, chilly. We're going to see lows a bit below zero as the air in place is dry and cold. And for Friday afternoon, highs only in the teens as you get up the Kuskokwim and Yukon rivers. Along the coast there, Macoriac and Nunavik Island, 27 for high. Still chilly below freezing down along the Alaska Peninsula. Saturday morning lows, we could still see some readings near or a bit below zero along and just north and west of the Alaska Range. And then for Saturday afternoon, should start to see temperatures get back up around or a bit above freezing, a little milder air trying to make a return. That'll be more notable as we get into Sunday and Monday. Look for those temperatures to continue to increase along the southwest as we get into early next week. But still Saturday afternoon, a number of temperatures will be getting back up above freezing again. Looking at extended temperature forecast, the 6 to 10 day outlook provided by the Climate Prediction Center, April 13th through the 17th, centered on the 15th, mid-month. Best chance, likelihood of below normal temperatures southeast interior, including the Copper River Basin down through Yakutat, northern half of the Panhandle, with temperatures averaging above normal along the southwest coast. That's the YK deltas over toward Bethel and maybe up to Dillingham. And then precipitation is expected to be a bit above normal across the southern parts of the state, south central into the southeast interior along the Alcan border. And then below normal precipitation, perhaps a little drier conditions up there through the northwest, especially along the central portion of the Brooks Range.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, moving along now to your aviation forecast. If you're pilot planning on having a flight here Friday into Saturday, one of the main weather features will be an area of low pressure out over the northern Gulf that will continue to slowly weaken. It will produce IFR conditions along areas of the northern Gulf into the northern Panhandle Friday morning. There could be pockets of IFR out through the south side, central portion of the Brooks Range and up off the northwest Arctic coast. And then we'll be watching a warm front out over the central Bering begin to push northeastward toward the mainland, but still some chillier air will reside over the west side of the state up through the Chukchi Sea and northern parts of the Bering. For Friday afternoon, IFR conditions will persist across areas of the Kenai, upper Cook Inlet, northern Gulf Coast into the Copper River Basin, and also there in the east side of Norton Sound. And then as we go into Saturday morning, IFR conditions are possible along the Alcan border through the eastern quarter of the state, all the way from the Arctic coast down into the Copper River Basin, east end there of the Alaska Range, including Metasta Pass, and then areas to the west, including around St. Lawrence Island in the lower Yukon Delta. And for Saturday afternoon, we'll still see areas of IFR through Norton Sound, lower Yukon Delta, west and southern side of the Seward Peninsula, as that warm front will be sitting just off to the southwest of there. There will be a push of milder air try to work its way back in up through the west side of the state as we head into the late weekend and early next week. Looking at pass conditions, Anaktuvik Pass will generally see MVFR conditions on Friday, though you could run into some IFR conditions the further south and west you fly of the south entrance. Adigan Pass should generally see MVFR conditions for Friday, and then further south and west, Lake Clark will see MVFR become VFR by Friday afternoon. Merrill hanging on to MVFR conditions, and as we round up through the central portions of the Alaska Range, Rainy Pass MVFR, as Windy Pass will also hold on to MVFR conditions. Further east, Isabel should see VFR conditions briefly there, maybe in the morning become MVFR. And Mentasta Pass should generally hold on to MVFR conditions, though the further south you fly of the south entrance, you could encounter IFR conditions. And Tanita Pass will start out early Friday MVFR, but trend toward IFR conditions as the day unfolds. And the same thing for Portage Pass. Look for MVFR conditions becoming IFR. Chilkoot and White will start out Friday morning IFR up there in the north end of the Panhandle, becoming MVFR as the day unfolds. And looking at freezing levels, the surface freezing line runs through the outer portion there of the Panhandle coast up to along the northern Gulf, and then well south of the Alaska Peninsula before crossing back up through the central Aleutians. And there is just a slight chance of some isolated moderate icing along the Gulf between 4,000 and 12,000 feet. Interior areas toward the Alcan border between 2,000 and 10,000 feet, though that would be rather isolated. And then also out over the western central Bering Sea between 3,000 and 10,000 feet. Upper level winds are strongest at 30,000 feet below the Gulf in the North Pacific. There is a wind max out of the west-northwest to 120 knots. Another wind max to 105 knots coming in off the Russian and Kamchatka coast. As we drop down to mid-levels at 9,000 feet, we see those winds again south of the Gulf, upwards to 65 knots there in the North Pacific. And then an area of winds of 50 to 65 knots from the southwest, riding along the coast of Japan up and through Kamchatka coastline. And then for Friday, as we get down to the 3,000 foot level, just above the surface, we find low pressure circulation there near just east of Prince William Sound. We have high pressure north of the central Aleutians. The strongest lower level winds, at least across the state, will be through the entrance of Cook Entrance Inlet there near Shelikof Strait, just south of Kodiak Island, to 45 knots from the northwest. Also some brisker winds there along the lower Yukon Delta to 40 knots coming in from the southwest. And this will translate to the potential for some turbulence across southwest parts of the state, west arm of the Alaska Range down through Kodiak Island. We could see some turbulence, moderate turbulence between the surface and 5,000 feet. And then as we head west, perhaps the lower Kuskokwim area, including the delta, surface to 4,000 feet, as well as on the south side of the Seward Peninsula. So that wraps up your flight weather. If you do have a flight, manage to get out, have a safe one.
What's up, my stargazing friends? Trace here. The best way to get excited about astronomy is to get to know a star, to make it your friend. And to do that, try observing a single star over and over again, like Vega. To find Vega, hit the skies just after midnight and look northeast. Vega is the blue-white main sequence star and the 5th brightest in the sky. It should be pretty easy to spot. Vega is 25.3 light years away, or 148.7 billion miles, which is relatively close for a star. It was the first star to be photographed in 1850 and is the basis for all the star magnitudes in our sky. Vega is in the constellation Lyra the Harp and is the brightest star in the Summer Triangle asterism. See, each star has a story. The more you look, the more you'll see colors and relative positions in the sky. Eventually, they'll become familiar friends who you look forward to seeing night after night. Keep looking up.
Tsunamis are a big threat not only to Alaska but around the Pacific because we have a lot of really big fault lines, and when they move in big earthquakes, they often move the water around them, and that's what causes tsunamis. I am Summer Ohlendorf, and I'm the science officer at NOAA's National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. Alaska's main tsunami threat is from the subduction zone that lays along the southern end of the state. When an earthquake happens underneath the ocean at one of these subduction zones, the edge of one of the tectonic plates ends up kind of flipping up as stress is released at that plate boundary. And when it flips up, it pushes up the water that sits on top of it, and it moves a whole lot of water all at once. And that water all then becomes part of the tsunami wave. Just like when you throw a rock into a pond, you get a series of ripples that head outward from where the rock landed. Tsunami waves travel outward from the disturbance caused by the earthquake. And that means you can get multiple waves, and they're really long waves that can last for hours. Tsunami waves can be hundreds of miles long from one crest to the next crest. And that means that those crests, or the tops of the two waves, can come in 20 minutes apart to an hour apart. In the deep ocean, tsunami waves are actually usually pretty small. They can be anywhere from a few centimeters to maybe a meter, depending on how far offshore you are. As tsunami waves approach the coast, they kind of pile up on each other, and the energy gets compressed, so they grow in size and they slow down a lot as the wave is squeezed into a smaller space. If you're standing on the beach and a tsunami may be coming, you may hear strange noises like an approaching freight train. You may also see water being sucked away from the shore much further than it would for a low tide, and much faster. And sometimes you can hear things like rattling of sand and rocks. So just being alert for any strange ocean behavior and strange noises is always a good idea when you're near the coast. Most likely you're not going to see something like a huge 100-foot breaking wave as a tsunami approaches. It's probably going to look something more like a step of water that's maybe a few feet high, or just a turbulent mass of water. And it may not be very big, but it's going to be moving pretty fast, and it's going to be probably carrying a lot of debris with it. Even what we think of as small tsunamis can be really dangerous because they're associated with a lot of energy and a lot of fast-moving water. The National Tsunami Warning Center is part of NOAA and the National Weather Service. At the Tsunami Warning Center, we're monitoring streams from seismic data and sea level data 24/7 every day of the year. So the seismic data tells us how the Earth is moving, it tells us when there are earthquakes, and using that data we can figure out where the earthquakes are, how big they are, and how deep they are. which tells us something about the tsunami hazard from those quakes. So as far as monitoring water levels, there's something called the DART system. That stands for Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis. And what those are little stations where there's a pressure sensor on the ocean floor and a buoy anchored nearby. The way it knows the difference between a normal ocean swell and a tsunami is mostly because of the wavelength. And when we look at the signal from a DART system, we can see those big long waves and distinguish them from other smaller transient waves. Our system of coastal tide gauges is also distributed worldwide and all across the ocean basins. And what these end up telling us is what the tsunami wave is doing at the coastline. We send out an information statement when there's an earthquake near one of our coastlines that doesn't pose a tsunami hazard. We also have the tsunami watch that may be issued for a faraway earthquake that has the potential to impact one of our coastlines. A tsunami warning is our most serious level, and that is the case where we would want people to evacuate from the coastline. If you hear a tsunami warning, you'll want to evacuate from that hazard zone to travel to a safe shelter, or just anywhere that's inland or higher ground outside of the hazard zone. Ahead of time, you'll want to think about where to go, what to take, and how you'll communicate with your friends and family members once you get there. It's important to remember that during a tsunami evacuation, a lot of people are going to be crowded onto the same routes trying to evacuate. During a tsunami warning, you may hear about it over the TV and radio, an alert on your cell phone. You can also see tsunami information directly on our website, www.tsunami.gov. And we're also on Facebook and Twitter, where we issue our alerts during the event.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. It's now time for marine weather, and looking at the sea ice edge, we continue to see the ice is as far south as St. George Island and off the southwest coast. It'll slowly continue to linger around there, and the edges at least begin to melt. A little milder air is going to creep up from the lower Bering as a warm front lifts up through the central Bering up along the southwest K deltas on up toward the southwest side of the Seward Peninsula. But overall, though, it'll be a slow process, and taking a look at what we have in terms of winds for the inner channels, generally from the southwest Petersburg on up through Lynn Canal, 10 to 15 knots, but northwesterly 20 knots down there toward Ketchikan, Metlakatla, Dixon entrance. Otherwise, onshore flow strongest, some gusts 30 to 35 knots south of Sitka out of the west. Waves for the Gulf, they're offshore, running about 8 to 10 feet. On Saturday, winds will turn more northwesterly through the inner channels, 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet. And then along the outer Gulf Coast, we expect winds generally upwards around 20 knots with waves anywhere from around 7 to 8 feet Yakutat westward to 10 to 13 feet as you get down towards Sitka and Craig. Friday, winds will be strongest at the entrance there of Cook Inlet from the west at 45 knots with waves upwards of 10 to 14 feet. Northwest winds, Prince William Sound around 20 knots, waves a few feet, and then also an area out there toward the west central Gulf, we'll see gale force winds to 45 knots and waves on the order of 10 to 15 feet. Saturday, winds across Cook Inlet will be out of the northeast 10 to 20 knots, at least the upper half, turning northwesterly 35 knots there at the entrance of Cook Inlet, and generally northwest winds 25 knots, Prince William Sound. Across Kodiak Island, winds will be out of the northwest to west 30 to 35 knots with gusts of 45 knots to Shelikof Strait. On the Bering side of the Alaska Peninsula, north winds 15 to 20 knots, but some stronger gusts on the east side, the Pacific side. Chiknik offshore there, gusts to upwards as high as 50 knots. And then for Saturday, look for winds generally out of the northeast to north across Kodiak Island, 25 to 30 knots, turning more easterly across the lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula out of the east at 25 knots, waves 6 to 8 feet either side there in the Bering or North Pacific. The Aleutians for Friday, We'll see north to northeast winds around 20 knots, the eastern Aleutians, but mid-Aleutians, the winds become more easterly, 20 to 25 knots. And for Saturday, winds will be picking up a bit out of the east across the eastern and central Aleutians, generally around 30 knots, with highest waves North Pacific side running 12 to 17 feet. Along the southwest coast, we will see southwesterly winds upwards to 25 knots there, especially from Nunavik Island westward and south of St. Matthew. And then look for generally southwest winds continuing offshore there of the YK deltas, extending back toward St. Matthew and on the order of 15 to 25 knots. Southerly winds up there through Norton Sound out of the south, 25 knots. And then looking at the Arctic coast, we're at 20 to 25 knots with the ice there still in place. Generally westerly winds, though they may try to turn still easterly ahead of that weakening front at Katovik. And then across the lower Chukchi, 10 to 20 knot winds, but ice remains in place. For Saturday, winds will be out of the west along the Arctic coast. 15 knots around Utqiagvik, picking up to 20 to 25 knots the further east you go, and then offshore, generally east-southeast flow around 20 knots, the lower Chukchi Sea, through the strait before turning more southwesterly there on the north side of Nunavik Island. Look for southwest winds 25 knots, again with ice in place. Late tonight into early Friday morning, low pressure will be situated right along the eastern Kenai, Prince William Sound area. This low will continue to weaken with a cold front extends up through the interior. This front does have some gusty winds along with the, areas of light snow that will be slowly pressing eastward and spreading the colder air toward Fairbanks up through the Yukon Flats as we go into the day on Friday. High pressure then over the state on the west side will continue to hold as a little warmer air tries to return up through the central Bering on Saturday. Warm front will lift up there just north of St. Lawrence Island up to the lower Yukon Delta, approaching the Seward Peninsula, and this will bring a little milder air for a change as the systems through the interior begin to weaken, and the coldest air will shift to along the Alcan border and especially into the Yukon Territory. So have a good night, everybody, and thank you for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.